And we are live. First of all, a big, big thank you to Butch and Drew from VMG. So before we get into the stream, for me, it was very important. It's very important to explain what is record slabbing. Because when I announced the streams, I got quite a few questions. What the hell are you talking about? So I will explain in a nutshell, because these are the specialists up here. I explain in a nutshell what slapping is. So if I have a record, I can send it into a grading company like VMG, and they grade the record, the cover, if there's shrink on it, if it's sealed, all these criteria. And afterwards, they put it in two sides of plastic. It gets sealed. It gets a label with a grading. And this is also the certification of authentication. This is the word I can barely speak in English. Can you guys help me out, please?
Yeah, authenticity. Yeah.
Authenticity. Thank you so much, guys. And so you have it sealed, which means you can, of course, open it with, I don't know, a screwdriver or something very carefully, but you have to consider that the money you spend on the grading is gone, right? Exactly. So once I open it up and I had the grading, it's gone. Okay. Did I explain that so far correct, guys?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the gist of it. Yes.
Okay, so guys, please introduce yourself. Introduce Vintage Media Grading.
Well, my name's Andrew Hoffman. I go by Drew. I'm a co-founder for VMG, and I was the founder of AAGS, the first grading company, which was established in 2018. And met up with VMG. We ended up merging last year, and here we are.
And I'm Mike Harwood, although no one besides my mom calls me Mike. Even my wife calls me Butch. So, and I am one of the co-founders of VMG. Lifelong music fan, music collector, but also lifelong sports card collector. And so, about really during the pandemic, started the process of as we my couple of my good friends and I were looking into our record collections and trying to expand our record collections. Had come upon a little bit of annoyance in our ability to get albums, say from Europe or from Australia, and trust the conditions. So we thought to ourselves, it would be nice if there's a third party that can vouch for the condition in case we're spending a lot of money on a valuable record. And so we started the process of founding Vintage Media Grading, and we're lucky enough to come upon Drew at the same time. We're following him closely, and thankfully, he's a great guy, and we joined forces and haven't looked back since.
Can you go into the process? What do I need to do to get my record graded and slabbed? What's the process with your company?
Drew, do you want to take that?
Sure. So the process is you go to vmgvinyl.com. There's a big submit here button, and you click that. There's an easy to follow form. You put in information such as the artist name, what kind of submission it is, is it opened, is it sealed, is it a double album, what kind of case you want, do you want it to be on display with the discs being shown, or do you want it all together? And then you answer just some basic questions. We have some slab preparation services as well, so we can do some shrink cleaning, sticker removal, ultrasonic cleaning. We can do some different things. So you make all your choices just like you would order any other product, and then you hit submit. Once we receive the order, you ship the item into us. It goes through a process where we examine the quality of the record. We give it a grade. If we do a visual grade on the vinyl record itself, we look at the sleeve, we look at the spine, and then as an add-on, we also listen to the record and provide a playback grade. And then we could even do an audio digital transfer, so we can transfer at that time as well. And then we go ahead and put that into the slab or the plastic case, and it gets ultrasonically sealed. We have a very expensive welding machine that ultrasonic uses sound waves to seal it, so that way it's very safe for the record. There's no chemicals being used, and that way we can also push through a pretty good volume of records as well. And it gets sealed with a label, and that label is unique to that particular record. That submission, it gives you all the details, the name of the album, any hallmarks that set it apart from others or could identify a specific variant, and then it gets a grade. So the grade is based off of a series of subgrades. So we grade the spine, the sleeve, and the vinyl itself. Those are listed on the label, and then you get your main grade. And if you flip it over, there's a QR code on the back. You can scan that, see all the information as well. That way you have access to it. We seal it up, we mail it back to you, and you can add it to your collection, send it to an auction house, or whatever you like. Most of our clients just like to have it in their possession and to be able to own it and know that the condition is frozen in time. So that's the entire process from beginning to end. You can send in one record, or you can send in, we've had some clients send in entire collections, hundreds at a time. So it's really what it is that you want to do, and we can take care of that for you.
So concerning the grading, if I grade a record and say, hey, this is VG+, my friend next to me says, oh no, for me, this is more near mint. So how do you make sure that you have, like, say, the proper grading, or at least you guys need to have the best grading because it's slapped? So, and I get it back and I say, oh, you guys, you have a kind of grading system from 1 to 10. It's not like we know from the gold mine standards, it's VG plus or something like this. You have grading from 1 to 10, and I think 10 is the best grade.
Yes.
So and you would say, okay, we give it a 7, and I say, no, I don't think so. I give it at least an 8. How do you make sure that you have the proper grading before you slab it?
Right. So our objective is to try to make it as objective as possible, although that is obviously an imperfect science. Pure objectivity with regards to matching everybody in the world's opinion of what, mint or excellent or VG plus is. What we did do is we took the gold mine grading and we tried to essentially expand it and separate it out into 10 different numbers. And so with our grading, a 10 may be mint. I believe a 8 is excellent. So those words still exist. They're just kind of pushed along into the numbers. And the way we saw it was exactly what you described is 100% right, which is one person's idea of very good may not be the other person's idea of very good. And that's kind of is what drew us into this, in that, if we're ordering something from Germany or from Australia and we're trusting somebody's opinion because they're selling it on Discogs, and then it comes in the mail and they say, well, this isn't mint. So while our grading rubric is very specific, in fact, I can kind of hold it up. This is kind of a little cheat sheet we use. Yep. This is kind of a little cheat sheet that we use. But what we do is we try to make sure that the consistency is consistent within VMG. So if you have a VMG 8, you can be sure that it's in a better condition than a VMG 7. It might not be it might not match what Soul Disco believes would be an 8, or in your opinion would be an 8. But our hope is that you can then compare 2 VMG items and know the difference between the 2 VMG items, as opposed to saying, I have an album I think is excellent. They have an album that they graded as excellent. I'm sure these are of the same quality. They may not be, because your excellent might not be ours, but if you have 2 VMG 8 excellents, you can be sure they're of the same quality because they were graded with the exact same rubric.
All right. So when I saw these the plastic slabs, and you get from me a sealed record.
Mm-hmm.
So my experience with shrink, with the foil over it, over time, it shrinks. So
Yeah.
It damages the corners, it bends the cover, and if it's in shrink, it also starts to bend the record. So now I have my record in your plastic slabbings. How can I be sure that this is not happening?
So our plastic slab is your album is actually even a sealed album with shrink on it gets placed in a polypropylene sleeve, which gets pulled tight, so there's very little movement of the album. So while there's no pressure pushing on the case to create, say, ring wear or anything else, there's also very little pressure or movement within the case itself to allow that bending, so it stays straight over time. So you're kind of avoiding the push in, but you're also not allowing a space as the polypropylene sleeve that's around it pulls it. You're not allowing space for that to bend into the inside sides of the case.
What about the corners?
The corners are protected by an edge. Don't have it in front of me, but Drew, do you have a case in front of you?
I don't have a case with me.
If you have that picture you had brought up earlier, the corners.
I'll bring it back.
Because we also don't want to. So if you look at the corners of that Impressions album, you'll see that there's a slight open, so it doesn't slam into the corner. So you can see where like the edge actually opens, so there's no corner banging going in there. However, the bag, which is hard to see, it's a perfectly clear bag that's actually holding it, is still pulling it tight so that there's not a lot of movement allowed front and back.
I see.
And when it comes to, if you don't mind me jumping in here, when it comes to the shrinkage of the cellophane wrapping on a record, it's not inherent that it just in any condition will shrink over time. So when we see a lot of damage, it's usually when it's been stored in a warm environment, such as a garage or an attic. We don't generally see that much shrinkage in a cool place or a dark place. So we always recommend, even if it's not sealed, if it's in our case, we always recommend not, as a collectible, not putting it into direct sunlight, keeping it in a cool place, or a place that's has air conditioning in the winter or in the summer, and then natural heating in the winter time. So that way it's not going to be it's going to be regulated. It's not going to be going under high temperature fluctuations. That's where the shrink wrap really starts pulling in on those sleeves over time, and it does take a long time to do that. So that's something that we always recommend to our clients as well. They could do whatever they want with our slabs, but if they want to make sure that everything's perfectly preserved as far as the shrink is concerned and no fading on the front and back cover, we ask that they go through those guidelines.
So wouldn't it be perfect if your slabs would be UV protected?
They are naturally UV protected to an extent. They're not quite museum grade, but they do offer, I don't know the exact amount, the percentage, I'd have to look. It's a PETG material, so it has a natural filtration. It's not as high as museum quality acrylic, for example, but we do offer the UV protection. Even then, though, even if it's museum grade, we recommend that it still not be in direct sunlight, if at all possible.
So I have a sealed Mega Brain from 1971. It looks thank you. It looks the same from the cover. It's sealed, so I can't look in it. It looks the same as the repress from 1974. It's everything the same. So how do you guys know which version I did send you?
That we wouldn't know. So in that case, what it would be listed at, and I don't know the exact, but I could, as an example, Ario Experience by Jimi Hendrix. I don't remember the exact years, but the first, I would say 7 to 10 years roughly, they put out the exact same sleeve. every single time. You know, they didn't change the sleeve. Even as the pressing changed, the sleeve didn't change. And so without opening it in a case like that, there is no way to know that it's a first pressing. And so in that case, our label is simply descriptive. I don't have it in front of me, but it would say something to the effect of 1968 to 1976. You know, could be any of those years. And so our goal as graders is simply to describe, or as when we're describing the album, not just grading it, but also describing it, is to always be accurate, even if that accuracy is limited by what we could possibly know about an album. And so for sealed albums, especially albums from the 60s and 70s particularly, where they kept using the same cover repeatedly, you cannot, without opening it, say it's a, you know, first pressing. In fact, we don't use the words first pressing on our album, on our labels. We only use the year or the possible years it may be if it were sealed. And that's similar. That's kind of a standard, you know, in the collectibles world for sports cards and comic books. Sports cards, they don't label it rookie card. They'll simply label it 1952 Mickey Mantle Topps card, or which actually wasn't his rookie anyway, or 19 whatever Amazing Spider-Man. And the reason for that is multifold, but the main reason is to maintain accuracy at all times. We don't want to ever take a guess as to what something might be. So if we can't be certain of it, we're not going to label it as such.
So for many people, so Drew, can you do me a favor and get closer to the microphone? You're way too quiet. We barely can hear you, and you have so many great things to say.
Does that sound better?
Oh, way better.
Way better. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Just one thing to say about that is we're trying our best to improve how that works. So if we don't have a hallmark, sometimes, it doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes we notice that records weigh differently between a 60s record and an 80s record or a late 70s record. So sometimes one is lighter than another. Sometimes they measure differently. So we're looking at every hallmark that we can possibly get our hands on, even if it's something to do with physical dimension or you know, some other aspect of its physical being, such as its weight, to be able to help us identify a specific version based off of ones that we have that aren't sealed and that we know are a specific year based off of the matrix codes on the record. So we're constantly updating and improving our database and trying to improve our capability of nailing down a specific release for a record that's like that doesn't have any external hallmarks, which makes it difficult. So that's where we really are proud of our process, is that we're constantly getting better, and we're able to, you know, be able to provide that information to our customers as we get that information. But what we're not willing to do is to guess and say, hey, it is a first pressing, and then have somebody open it and have it be a second or a third pressing. So we are very careful when we put information on the label, so that when people are, you know, receiving a graded record from us, they're receiving a physical grade and what we can perceive from that record, so that they're getting factual information without us going out too far and saying that it is something that it isn't. So we are very, very careful and conservative in that sense, and I think that has actually helped a lot of our customers trust us even more, rather than, you know, a company that will say that something's a first pressing and then ends up not being a first pressing if it's investigated.
Don't get me wrong on this, but if we haven't talked about the cost yet, what this whole process cost me. But if I say I spend a certain amount of money and send in the record, I'm not out of the world of cards and sports cards and toys and all of this. So I'm totally have no entrance point to this. But for me, it would be important to know from you guys, because you're the experts, to know do I have a first press? Do I have a second press? Because, and we get to that later, in the investment market, this makes a difference between a couple of $100 or even $1,000.
Right. That's 100% true. Unfortunately for sealed records, it often just is not, it just isn't possible. So in the, and then there's the question, you know, we talk to people about first pressings, etc. And what our thought was regarding, you know, labeling even an open record that is well known to be a first pressing, or well thought to be a first pressing, is if we know it was a 1968 album and we put first pressing on there, and someone says, well, you know, this was, you know, pressed in very small amounts, you know, for maybe a batch of 100, not put out in stores, wouldn't that be the first pressing? And then someone else says, well, you know, this one was pressed in Richmond, but this one was pressed in Compton. Which one was pressed first? So we got into this situation where with certain albums, we would be afraid that if we labeled something first pressing and then new information came out about it in the future, now it's labeled first pressing, but to us, it was just, everything you said is 100% true, but we felt we would get in less issues with mislabeling, even if, and we've had plenty of people say, can you please label this first pressing? Can you please label it first pressing? And because we wanted to stay consistent, we said that's just not our policy to do. We can label it as the year and describe the pressing as best we can, year, Compton pressing, etc. But because our goal, and I understand as an investor that you may want it to say rookie card for baseball cards, or, you know, first pressing right on the label. But, you know, for the purposes of consistency, we wanted all our labels to be the same. We just decided we're going to mention the year, and then the market itself, the collectors themselves, can determine whether that year and that pressing plant they would consider the first pressing.
I got you.
Sometimes it's a no-brainer. Sometimes,
100%.
You can look at an album and be like, yes, that is definitely a first pressing. Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction, for example. You know, the earliest pressing that we know of is the band front cover, or the uncensored front cover with the oval hype sticker. You can look at that at a glance and know what it is. It's easy, but like the Jimi Hendrix Ario Experience album that was discussed before, or the Maggot Brain, it's really vague to know for sure. So we wanted to be consistent across the board and really let the collectors do the thinking and to do the research and to know what they are buying and based off of the information that we're providing them. And so having that information be as consistent and accurate as it can possibly be from our perspective is what we're going for.
I've seen a YouTube video where somebody said, hey guys, you know what's coming up? You have to see the grading companies for comic books, toys, and video games brought these kind of fans down to their knees, and now it's coming for records. So what I experienced, that was last year. So there was a heritage auction, and their auction of some graded slabbed records. And there was a record, I think Beatles' second album, that sold for over $2,000. If you check at the same time on eBay or Discogs, mint condition, because it was graded, I think 8.5, 9, around that thing, it was like $200 or $300. So I had now my slabbed record, which is now 10 times more worth than the raw edition. Mm-hmm. So that's for me the point where I decided for myself to say, okay, now I have a separation between a collector and an investor. Do you see that the same way?
100%. Yeah, I think there's some overlap. I think there are certain albums that even a vinyl collector and audiophile may choose to have graded. Say if they had the Velvet Underground and Nico in perfect condition and hadn't peeled the banana, and they might say, well, listen, I mean, the cover itself here is really the thing that has so much value. That person may choose, even if they're an audiophile who spins records every day, they may choose, I want to maintain that. Even maybe not now, but maybe someday before I sell it, I may want it slabbed so that I can get a premium when I decide to sell it overseas, or if I want to put it on eBay or a heritage auction, etc. But yes, Drew has, you know, from the very beginning, always told us he often will buy two things of a record that he wants to slab. He'll, you know, one to what do you say? One to grab, one to slab, or one to play, one to, yep. Yeah. But that is absolutely true. And I just want to mention, and Drew can go into this a little more, our services also provide soft grading. So what soft grading is say you have an album that you want to buy or that you want to sell to someone overseas, but that person doesn't, it's a valuable album. They don't want to spend $300-400 on that album without being sure that what you're saying is very good, but they also want to play it. So we can actually do soft grading too, which basically puts it into a plastic sleeve. A tamper-proof sticker is put over it that tells you the identification of the album, what album it is, and what the grade is. But that is designed just to rip open. Basically, what it is it's designed to be a very inexpensive third-party option for you to sell an item to someone else who wants to play it, where they've now run it through a third party to say, yeah, this is exactly what was described by the seller, and this is what you can expect when you buy it. So I got a little bit sidetracked there, but no, I would say, yeah, I would absolutely agree. There's investors and collectors, and there's everything in between. And our goal has never been to disrupt vinyl collecting. In fact, I mean, I still, you know, as you can see from Drew's collection there, he is a huge audiophile. I'm still always spinning albums. But, you know, our goal was to be a compliment, not to tell everybody your album is worthless if it's not graded, but instead to provide something for the people. And there's a lot of them who collect the physical form of the album and put a premium on that personally over the sound or the playing of the album. And not everybody is like that. But there are some, and there are people, you know, who want the mention. You mentioned the Beatles album that was 2000 versus 200, and it's very similar in comic books or toys or baseball cards. Those albums, hopefully, the $200 version of that, hopefully will remain available on eBay, on Discogs all the time. You know, I would hope that we do not grade, you know, a large percentage of all albums out there. Our hope is to provide,
because for future generations, there is no good stuff to listen to.
Right. What we find is happening is that the stuff that gets sent to us, except for when people send us stuff that's in bad condition because they essentially want it as a display, they're not listening to it anymore. This was something that was important to them as a child or something they grew up with. They just want it as a nice display, labeled, kind of as a keepsake. The others that are sending us stuff are mostly stuff that is sealed, and they were never intending on opening it anyway. They were basically saving it because it was sealed, or things that are in perfect condition. And I would say, wouldn't you agree, Drew, that I would say the condition sensitive thing that people are sending us the most are the album covers. Yeah. Like, you know, it is the cover itself for a lot of the collectors or investors that they really, that's the hardest thing to keep in great shape. And it doesn't necessarily impact your enjoyment of playing with the album. But it is the difference between, you know, if you have a perfectly mint cover of a Meet the Beatles, I mean, that is incredibly rare. It's so old, was so commonly played. So for you to have that cover in such great shape, you might decide, listen, I don't want to some people will decide, I don't even want to touch this. I'm afraid to touch it because it's in so great shape. I can get a good conditioned Meet the Beatles, play that. I think a lot of what we're getting are people that want to maintain the condition of rare albums, particularly the condition of condition sensitive covers.
Yeah, one aspect of that is I always think of the movie Indiana Jones. He's famous for saying, other than "I hate snakes," he says it belongs in a museum, and he doesn't say that about everything. And so, one of my examples that I always like to use is this sealed. It's not a first pressing, but it's a later pressing, sealed with a gold stamp promo on the corner. It's very cool, and I have already like 6 copies of Beatles Rubber Soul, and I listen to all the time. I have the Beatles mono box set back here. I listen to the UK version. I listen to the Capital US version. I have plenty of those to listen to, but how often are you going to run out and find a sealed copy of the gold stamp promos? Not often at all, especially in the condition that this one's in. So I did pay a premium for it, and so I want to preserve that. It belongs to be to be preserved. I mean, I want to be able to have people appreciate that years down the road. I don't want someone who just doesn't believe in sealed records to open it up and have it go by the wayside, and then 20 years down the road end up in a thrift store bin somewhere.
Right.
I appreciate that way too much. So you can see, I mean, this is not all the records I have. I have walls of them, and they're all open, and I listen to them. I have maybe like 6 or 7 slabbed records. Now, granted, I don't sell my slabbed records because I own part of a grading company, but I want to protect that. I feel like it's my fiduciary responsibility to make sure that these are protected and saved. They belong in a museum, and for the really nice ones, the really cherry ones. And then the rest of them, they belong on a turntable platter, and they are supposed to be spinning at 33 RPM with a needle on it, and me sitting and drinking a glass of wine and enjoying them. So that's really where I found this element of collecting, is that it adds a whole new elevated part of the hobby. It's not just about the music, it's also about preserving the music and keeping it alive for many, many decades into the future. And if that turns into an investable commodity, that's up to some people to buy and sell it, and you can do that now that it has a label and a grade, and it's known, it's a known entity. But it also is something, like Butch said, it's a keepsake. It's something that I can hand down to my family when I'm not here anymore, and they can appreciate it, and they can know that it's locked in the same quality as it was when I picked it up on eBay or from the record shelf at the store or wherever it may have come from. So that's really from an audiophile's point of view where I look at things, and that's why I really believe in what we do. I'm even a musician, so I come from the musician's perspective that I want to make the music too, not just lock it up. And so that's something that I always preach, is to buy one to slab, buy one to grab. In my case, I buy a lot of them to grab and maybe one to slab. But in a lot of cases, I don't even have one to slab because I haven't found that one that really deserves it. So that's the journey, that's the quest, and that's what's fun about it.
So the thing is with the example from the Heritage collection is, if I'm going to grade, and before we discussed, you guys seen some of the records up back here, I can at least edit 1 or 2 digits to the current amount of what it's worth.
Yes. So, and that is true. And what that amount is really the premium of uncertainty. That's what you're kind of adding. So, to people who might be more familiar with other types of collectibles, say, I'm just going to use baseball cards. It's because it's what I grew up collecting a lot of, like obsessively. And I never had them graded. I just didn't like the idea of having them in the cases. I liked going through them in huge lots and just sitting there, cross-legged on my rug and just sorting them. And I mean, I kind of did that all the way up through my 20s. But when I kind of wasn't into collecting cards anymore and had much further moved into vinyl, I wanted to sell them on eBay. And I started to realize that the difficulty became in me selling from eBay is that if I didn't have them graded, I was losing a premium on them for uncertainty. So I could say this Mickey Mantle card was mint, but the person was, in California, we're in Rhode Island, which is on the East Coast of the States. And then over on the West Coast, if someone's in California buying it, they weren't going to pay $1,000 for this card because they really couldn't be sure without holding it that I was being truthful to them as to what the condition was. And so I realized I could only sell this card for $100 to someone in California if I didn't first grade it and then send it to them, because then they could trust what they were getting. And so it certainly is for someone who wants to hold a Mickey Mantle card. You can still go on eBay and you could still buy that card for $100. But the person selling it is losing a premium on what they could have sold it for, because they're essentially forfeiting a bit of certainty, and they're essentially giving the buyer a discount on the fact that you essentially have to just trust me that the way I've evaluated this album is accurate. And I think, for people, and I'm sure a lot of your audience has done a lot of Discogs purchases. And I know if they've done as many as me, they've gotten things in the mail after purchasing on Discogs, and they're like, this is not what you described. And I say this all the time, but kind of right when we started this, I actually think the first day my two friends and I were texting kind of back and forth during the pandemic saying, there needs to be an independent third-party grader for records. I had received a Green River album, which is one of the kind of precursors to grunge and the Seattle sound in the United States. And it was labeled as an original 1985 or 80. I can't remember which one I bought. It came to me with a sticker on it that said MP3 included.
Oh.
I thought to myself, I'm pretty sure there were no MP3s included in 1985 or 1988 versions of Green River albums.
That was a unique version then.
And then, and then you go to return it, and the person I bought it from was in Europe, and they were like, that cost us, $25 to ship out to you. We're not taking that back. Like, you can, and I was like, well, I had bought it. I actually already have the album. I had wanted it because I was like, oh my God, someone has a mint sealed version of this. And then it comes in the mail and I couldn't even return it. They wouldn't take a return.
But when you ordered records from Discogs and you got them in the mail, what was your intention to do with the records?
That one, because I already owned that record, it bothered me that the record I owned of that was not in perfect condition. I didn't like, and it was one that I play, but I didn't like the fact that the album itself was creased. I mean, not the album cover was creased, and is quite worn. So when I saw someone selling one kind of brand new, I wanted a brand new mint one and I wasn't planning on grading it myself. So unless I do grade some just to put up for, to show off, I guess, in my house, I would never grade and sell my own stuff, but that's kind of what I am and it's just a type of collector, and it's not the right type of collector by any means, but just the way that I am, I have a hard time handling knowing that I own something that isn't the best version of that thing. And that's just kind of me personally. It's not the right way by any means. It's probably the wrong way.
But if you buy a sealed record and it gets slapped, and after 15 years you decide, okay, I cracked that thing open, and then you open it up, you're super happy, you put it on your turntable, and you have a pressing issue on it.
Yeah. So you mean like it's the wrong pressing? Is that what you mean?
Whatever kind of. So and then you're sitting there, shit, should I have known 15 years ago when this record was still somehow available?
Yeah, 100%. Although I would say for me, because of the type of collector I am, I would be buying that to never open it. For that one, I'd be buying to never open. But I 100% agree that there are people that, I'll give you an example. Sealed old, and I'm sorry, I keep going back to sports cards, but it's only because that's kind of the most well-known type of grading. But sealed packs from, say, the 50s, they go for a premium. And the reason they go for a premium is because they are rare. And the thought is that what's inside them would be in perfect condition. To get a 1952 card that's in perfect condition would be great. Most people who buy sealed packs today from the 50s are not intending to open them. But there are some people.
The risk is too high that you have no rookie card from
exactly
100%.
But there are people that do it, and they buy. And the reason is they buy it. You know, they can be sure it's not a fake wrapper or anything like that. They buy it, they open it. Maybe they do it for a few views on TikTok or something, but or maybe they do it because they have so much money they can buy old packs for $1,000 and open them. I don't know, but I don't think that person's wrong or mistaken to do that. And I would tell anybody who buys a sealed album, a slabbed album on the secondary market, or who wants us to slab an album, is that the understanding is when doing it, you're kind of planning for it to be a keepsake. However, if you're just buying it on the secondary market because you want to know what it is and crack it open, you certainly could do that. I mean, then it's no longer, you could never resell it and say this was a VMG 9 because you broke it open. But I mean, there's no harm in doing that. You may be happier doing that simply because now that record you ordered from Australia, you had a third party look at before you paid $500 for it.
I totally get your point with cards. I get the point also with video games, because you can emulate the video game on your computer and you can play it the same way as you did in 1989. So you can still have that. But for me, a record is a totally different thing. So, I consider myself of the definition as a collector. I want to have a connection to the record. I want to have all these things. And if I'm in the mood, I want to play the record on my turntable and not listen to a copy of that. So for me, that's a strange way of collecting.
Yeah, I totally understand. Yeah, I mean, you can't replace what a person values. Like the value that you put into that record is important. It's incredibly important. It's your personal what you like. It's your emotional investment. It's what you love. And there are going to be people out there who do not want a record that's sealed. I mean, slabbed, which is 100%, totally agree. I would mention that, there was a recent article that I believe was a few months ago regarding new vinyl sales. And the article estimated that 70% of new vinyl records being sold in department stores specifically are never played on a turntable.
Yep.
And what's interesting is now, when we were growing up, if we loved a record or we loved a band, if you wanted to listen to them, you needed to go buy the album. And it was not only your source of actually hearing the records rather than just hoping it shows up on the radio, hearing the songs, but it was also your source of physical ownership of that band. You know, you love this band, and I want to own a piece of them. And I want people that when they come in my room to see all the Led Zeppelin records up on my wall, because I'm a huge Led Zeppelin fan, or Van Halen, or Miles Davis, or whatever. And what's interesting now is that in order to listen to the music, just to hear the songs, maybe not hear them at a certain quality that you're used to, you don't need to own the record. And yet, at least in the States, a lot of record buying right now is happening amongst young people in their teens and 20s, who can access those songs at any moment in their pocket. And yet they still want ownership of this band they love. And a lot of them don't ever play the record. And whether that's right or wrong isn't for me to say. It's their record. But I think there is actually a number of people, and it may make people like Drew bristle, who is a huge audiophile and listens really to nothing but records on vinyl. But there's a number of people who are collecting records as a keepsake or a decoration, or simply to denote their ownership and fandom. And I think that number in 2023 is probably higher than or 2024 is probably higher than it's ever been.
You know what? This record, hold on, I'll show you. This record, one second. This record, and also like many other records, I can't play digital because they are not available on Spotify. So that's my only way to listen to the music. And now I do what?
Right.
Make an MP3 out of it? What
no, don't.
The audiophile person says to this, making an MP3 out of a record. It's horrible.
Yeah. No, don't. Yeah, don't make an MP3 out of it. And those are exactly the types that, you know, for someone like you who listens to those records, I would say don't slab that record. I mean, it would be crazy to slab that record. But if you had, say, that, and then you happen to have a second, version that's in mint, it's just a mint cover, you might decide, well, I would slab it, keep it, and show it because I love this band and I think it's so cool. I could show it off. But that would be totally, up to you. There's certainly no right or wrong. And I would maybe err on the fact that if you have an album that is, rare enough that what your experience listening to it is, can't even be close to duplicated via a streaming service, especially if that isn't even available on the streaming services, then I would probably second guess your desire to slab that in a tamper-proof case.
So let's just talk again a little bit about the vinyl investors. Where you were in touch with this, how is the scene in the United States with the investors? Because when I look back at the comic book market, so I've seen some YouTube videos where the market, so that's funny, it's almost like Discogs, where you can see a certain comic book and the pricing and all of this, and this market totally crashed. So the same thing could happen with the slabbing of records, because it's the price is pushing and pushing and pushing, and at a certain point it needs to break. So please let's talk about a little bit about the situation with the investors.
Yeah, Drew, do you want to talk about your experience with investors?
Yeah, so the market, when you're investing in anything, it's a calculated risk, right? So cards, for example, did amazing during the pandemic, and the bubble kind of burst on the cards, but people are still slabbing cards, and there's buying and selling going on. Same with comic books, as you brought out. Same with video games. Collectibles have their ups, they have their downs. Just because you slab a record does not mean it's going to be worth 10 times its value and then 100 times its value in 10 years from now or anything like that. But what you are doing, and this is the key, is if you want to get into investing in vinyl records, you are going to want to take something that is almost unreachable. You want for example, a first state butcher cover that is in near perfect condition or perfect condition, sealed. Edges are sharp. There's no staining or coloration on the cover. I mean, we're talking about a unicorn, right? But if you could find one, now as an investor, that interests me, and I want to lock that down. I don't want anything to happen to that. I want it to stay as protected as possible, and to be able to, live its life from now onward as that first state butcher cover that's sealed and in perfect condition. So I would send it into the grading company, and I'd get it graded. Say it's graded at 9.0. So what I would do then is, I don't just have that plastic case with the record in it. I have that record with that grade and that serial number on a population report. So that population report is really where that market starts to flesh itself out. And then now, once I start selling and changing hands with that piece, now we have a market, and we can start tracking the value of that piece, whether it's going up or going down, what kind of supply, what kind of demand, and things like that. So that's what the investors are looking at in any kind of collectible space. Now, you have to have all those pieces in place. So it's a very much a oversimplification by saying, hey, you're just taking a piece of music and locking it up in plastic. We are putting it into a system, so to speak, that if you choose to do so, you can now know how many 9.0 butcher cover first states sealed are out there in the ether. And before, you can't do that. I mean, Discogs, you can kind of do that. And I've seen buyers and sellers even then, say, hey, only 9 people have this one record on Discogs. It's that rare. So even in its raw state, people are still using, what population reports we have available to us as record collectors now to establish rarity, scarcity for a collectible record. So we're just taking that and, as a third party, making something that is reliable for people to buy and sell off of, if that's how you choose to collect your slab vinyl. Because out of those 9 people that have that one record on Discogs, did they enter it accurately? Do I know for sure that it's actually in, near mint condition? My experience, and the whole reason why I started AAGS and the guys here started VMGs, because our experiences were, people don't know they're going to always inflate the grade if it's going to benefit them. Now, obviously, we have the good guys. We have the guys that have the good ratings, who are very conservative on their grades, so that we can, buy and sell. But what happens if the package gets a little wrinkled, and now there's a crease in it? That's where the plastic case comes into play. It's very unlikely it's going to get damaged in shipping, or at least to that degree where it will damage the piece that's inside. So as far as investors are concerned, it's not a dirty thing. It's not a bad thing to talk about. People in the raw collecting community do it all the time as well. As I brought out on Discogs, they establish the scarcity and they adjust the price accordingly. In fact, there's something that's going to be coming up. I'm not going to say I'm predicting the future on this, but there's going to be there's going to be some controversy over these, and this is coming from an audiophile point of view. So that record that you showed, hey, I can't find this on streaming. I'm going to keep it and listen to it, and it probably sounds really good. There's these new injection molded techniques to bring the cost down on vinyl records, to be able to make more of them, and to be able to do it more consistently, which I'm all for. I'm all for being able to spend less money on my collection than I have been. that's great. But so far, the reviews that I've been seeing is, hey, you know what? It feels different. It sounds different. Some guys say it doesn't sound as good as the vinyl counterpart. Some guys do. I know Fremer posted the video. He wouldn't even give his opinion. I don't know why that's the case. But you know, it's neither here nor there. There's not a lot of examples out there yet for us to listen to. I haven't gotten my hands on one. But the point that I'm making is, what happens if you take that? They take that record that you were showing me that you love, and they're gonna now repress it on this new injection molded technology. It's not the same experience for you personally as the vinyl counterpart, the original pressing from 1963 or whatever the case may be. So you like that original pressing. You don't like the sound quality and the feel and the experience that you get from the new injection molded solutions. So which one's going to be more collectible? Which one's going to be more sought after? Are people going to start selling those original pressings at a premium because you get a better experience, or the experience that you want, as opposed to the injection molded options? So we're almost in the same ball game now as comparing the streaming to the vinyl records. But now it's a little bit different. You have two pieces of physical media and a preference over listening to one over the other, handling the physical medium over one over the other. So what's are people going to be looked down upon for selling the older original items at a premium? I have a feeling that's going to take place, and is that wrong? That's the question that we're going to have to ask. And so I don't want to get into the weeds of capitalism or any of that stuff, but collecting and investing in graded slabbed records needs to be put into that perspective as well. It's not wrong. It's just something that is a known entity that can be preserved for a very long time and be a known entity for buying and selling. You know how many are out there. A third party is reporting how many of them are out there, and hopefully any other grading company is going to report their population reports as well. So that's where we come from as far as investing in records.
So as far as my experience concerns, it's always the original pressing, one of the first few records, especially when we're talking about records from the 60s, the 70s, also the 80s, 90s hip-hop records. It's always the original first press, or like I said, an early press, that's always been sold for more than the reissue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So and there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. That's how the band originally wanted it to be released. It's the fresh tape that was used to press it. It was the first stamps. Some of them are even more sought after because they have errors on the labels because it's they had to rush it to market or whatever the case may be. So yeah, you're exactly right. There's reasons to buy certain versions over another, and you're going to pay a premium for it. So it's going to be the same way with a slabbed record.
Interesting, Drew, because a little bit of that premium that you're paying, and I don't know if this is obvious to it is certainly the way it sounds, but the investment thinking and the way the market treats collectibles has a little bit of investment thinking already built into it. So another of the reasons that first pressing is more valuable is because oftentimes it's scarce. It's more scarce because it's older. Condition is more difficult because it's older. It's been around longer. It was often pressed at lower numbers than subsequent repressings. They would often press 10,000, see how the band did, and after they sold it, they would press more. And there's also a premium added to that along the same premiums that you see in other collectibles, which is the idea of a rookie premium, which is basically the first Spider-Man comic book will always be more valuable than the second, third, fourth. The first
Batman,
Babe Ruth card. Yeah, the first
Michael
Babe Ruth card.
rookie card,
Right.
1985, for example.
They're always worth more. So even if you don't realize it, that premium that is being charged for that first pressing is already being built by not just listeners and audiophiles. It's being built by an investment community who puts a premium on rookies, who puts a premium on scarcity, and who puts a premium on condition. And those three things, while condition certainly of the vinyl certainly impacts an audiophile's enjoyment of the record, but those three things are often very much actually the due to the impact of investors more than collectors. And so there is already a premium being paid to all collectibles because of the impact of investment thinking, not just, collector thinking, not just the story in that first Amazing Spider-Man, which is, I don't even know, but say if someone loves the story, the reason even before CGC started grading comic books, the reason that first Amazing Spider-Man was worth so much was because of it was a rookie, it was scarce, it was difficult to find in good condition because it was old.
So do you think that in 5 years, let's say you have a market share of, I don't know, 5% of the whole vinyl market share in the United States, do you think in 5 years it will be 25, 30% that this is a thing for the record collectors or the investors? Because like I said, for me, that's also with the comic book. I can't read in it. I can't enjoy it, So I do get it with cards, retro games, everything like this. But how do you see the future of record swelling in 2 to 5 years?
I think personally, Drew, did you want to? Because I think I think personally, the desire to play records will always be there and will never be pushed out by investments of records. However, I do think there will be opportunities. Say you were to go on, I think in 5 years, I think if you went on Discogs or eBay or an auction site and you want to buy Van Halen's self-titled first album, I think you will see a number of graded versions, and I think you'll see a number of ungraded versions. I think you'll see some sealed graded versions. I think you'll see some unsealed, vinyl visible graded versions. I think you will see a ton of ungraded versions that you'll be able to get. Do I think that super rare albums, super rare ones, do I think there's a risk, which I could see if I were a collector of and an audiophile, I think I wouldn't be so much worried about, would Fleetwood Mac Rumors still be available if grading slabbing it'll always be available. Because, what might, and I think the only risk I could see to the audiophile collector community is if there are super rare records for which their value is so high because there's only 5-10 of them out there, then similar to a Mickey Mantle rookie card, in maybe not 5 years, but maybe in 20 years, you may not be able to reliably find that album ungraded if the graded version is so valuable that people would never dare buy an ungraded one simply because they would assume, well, if this is so rare a record and it's so valuable, why wouldn't the person have graded it? I think that's a possibility, but I think that would only be with exceptionally rare records. And I think we're nowhere near that with records. We are there with baseball cards right now. Not buy a 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle unless it's graded. If someone puts it ungraded on eBay, it is such a valuable card that no one would bid on it. And if they did, they'd bid a few bucks because they would think this is definitely fake. I don't think that's going to happen with Rumors or Welcome to the Jungle or Nevermind But I think it might happen with albums that are so super rare. I think that's possible, but I think we are years, if not decades, away from reaching that point where there's none available that aren't graded.
Yeah, and to that point, Butch, even if that were the case, I could always buy one of those graded pieces.
And open it.
I know I'm going to handle it well. In 2 minutes, I could have it broken out of the case. I can enjoy it for years. I will handle it in a way that's impeccable. I'll keep it in a top loader, and it'll be fine. And then
if you wanted to sell it someday,
yeah,
you would get it graded again.
I'll spend the $39 to have it graded again, and then it'll retain its value, or depending on the market, maybe even be much more valuable. So right. that's the risk that you would
right. There's nothing stopping that person from buying that record graded and just break it open and playing it. I mean, there's really nothing. I guess the risk of breaking it open is as long as you're not, as long as you've got good dexterity to break it open, you're not taking the risk. But
totally got you. Let's talk about the price. So you've mentioned that $39 is the grading, and do I need to ship it? When I'm in Europe, how do I get my records to you?
Yeah, we actually have a handful of folks from Germany who send stuff in. So you would mail it in normal post. We give you recommendations on how to package your items, and it's the same as if you buy it from Discogs or on eBay. Keep it in a plastic top loader sleeve. Take the record out and put it behind the sleeve so it doesn't bust the seam or anything. And then double box it. Make sure it's going to survive the trip. And depending on if it's sealed's $39. I misspoke. $49 is if it's open. That's the base price. That's vinyl in sleeve. If you wanted to break it out and have multiple slabs, we have a patented hinged case. So that's what really makes us stand out, is that a lot of grading companies, like for video games, for example, you can't see the actual cartridge itself, so you have to trust if it's a 5-screw or a 3-screw cartridge. With our hinged display, our case, you can actually have the record in its own holder. You can see that RL on the Bob Ludwig hot mix on Led Zeppelin 2, or you can see that test pressing label or the promo label, whatever the case may be. So there's options for that, and that's like $25 for each additional slab that you add to the hinge. So the average price that people pay with multiple slab preparation services and things like that, is like the $125 range. But you can get into it for a sealed record for $39 plus shipping and insurance, and then $49 if it's open plus shipping and insurance. So those are the base prices.
I would be very skeptical because it's so cheap.
Yeah, so that was, the biggest. We actually wondered back in the COVID times, why hasn't anyone done this with records? Because it just seemed, it seemed obvious that someone would do it in our, collectible minds. That someone would do it. And what we realized was that there were a couple of big obstacles for records. Number one, the shipping of it's big. A baseball card, you can fit something this big. You can fit 30 of them in a box, send them back to somebody to pay a small amount. So it was important for us to make the investment immediately and from the start in trying to make the case as mass producible, as reliable, as tamper-proof, but also as cost-effective as possible, and not to kind of let the world know some of the problems that Drew's company originally had. But one of the reasons that he had a problem was because he was using acrylic molded cases. That's actually one of his original cases from his original company, which was AAGS. But that took a lot of cost, and he was having to charge about $100 to do that because the cost of individually making a case for every single album was too high. So we went right from the start in trying to be able to keep that cost, our unit cost, down as much as humanly possible, because we know that the shipping cost of a large item can be unwieldy. And so we really have worked at efficiency regarding our unit cost, our initial unit cost of each item, because we thought if we have to sell everything for $100, people aren't, plus they have to ship it and then we have to ship it back to them. It's going to be so expensive, people would never do it. And so we have started, and that's not to say that I'm not 100% sure that it'll always stay $39.99. When you're starting with a kind of a new concept, especially a concept that is, as might be controversial to the people that have their heart and soul into a collectible space, and it might be controversial to some. We certainly also don't want to price people out of the market right off the bat.
But Drew, the former company you've mentioned, they have a 99% UV protection on their cases.
Yes. So with these cases, they are museum grade. You can't without a coating on PETG, you can't get museum grade. I think PETG is, I'm probably going to be wrong on this, but I think it's somewhere around 70%. So this is getting around 90, 95, 99%. And so with that, though, comes, you have a business element into it. So it took me about 45 minutes to build one of these by hand. And whereas our PETG cases, you can have welded in probably about 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So it's so much faster. We can now put that time into having more accurate speccing, more accurate grading, do much more research in that sense. And aside from that, we've also put a lot of resources into automating as many processes as we possibly can, so that our focus is labor-wise in researching which piece it is and being able to provide a very accurate grade with reliable background information.
And certainly as we grow more mature as a business, as we continue to add customers, by no means is what we offer today the limit of what we'll be offering in the future. When you first start, there's obviously business reasons as to why you need to kind of focus on certain things and can't, focus on everything right from the start. So premium cases, premium options, different types of cases. Our 7-inch cases should be coming out before the end of the calendar year. Those are all things that will certainly be on the horizon. Specific packing, we already have some boxes that we can send you for packing, but we're actually expanding on those. So there's a lot of things, boxes that people can keep their albums in once they're graded, to make it easier for them to kind of look through their collection. These are all things that are certainly, not off the table and will be added in time, but it would be naive for me to say that, when you first start, you get to start with every single thing ready to go right off the bat and have every single option. But we hope to have every single option.
Because you are handling people's most treasured
of course
things.
Yeah.
Sometimes
of course.
you have to be,
and some of that is, there are certainly albums also, not only with UV protection, but I give you examples of albums that we can't slab. Like right now, those box sets behind Drew, we would not be able to slab that Beatles box set he has back there. There's a Pearl Jam album called No Code, which was their 4th studio album, and it's just bigger. It's the cover is bigger. It doesn't fit in our case, and so for that, we will need in the near future to develop, specific cases. And in those cases, what we probably, and what not to spread the word too much on our future plans, but we have plans for how we are going to do that. But we don't want to be too specific until we're ready to introduce them. But there's some things that right now we can't do because not all albums are identical and not all sizes are identical.
And you're also not grading bootlegs, right?
We are not. So we will not, a bootleg that, so an unofficial release, we will grade the condition and we will put on the label unofficial release. So it'll say unofficial release on it. A bootleg we are not grading. So anything that doesn't have a known provenance through the collecting world or through a known, producer, we are not grading those.
All right, for the last 15 minutes, because this is a bank day in the United States, right?
It's Labor Day, so
it's Labor Day, so I'm very thankful that we could make it in timely. So for the last 15 minutes, we are going through some questions, and I already marked a couple of questions. Like Zidvik, does VMG publish the grading criteria for your cheat sheet so that the process is more transparent for the collector?
Yes, so the grading criteria is not written in this cheat sheet manner, which is kind of our, I don't know, I protect that with my life, but everything on this is written in more paragraph form on our website, www.vmgvinyl.com. And then if you go up to services and grading, it's one of the drop downs on top. You can read the grading rubric, which is basically this thing I showed you, but explained. This is all in shorthand, for us to use and for the business to use, easier than just for quick reference.
All right. So what are your qualifications to determine the grading?
Drew,
yeah, so really it comes down to that rubric that we have published. I'm a lifetime collector of vinyl. I have so many times been burned by somebody saying it is mint, and then I get it and it has creases and fingerprints and scratches and scuffs. So I really worked hard at a standard, and for the longest time as record collectors, we've used the gold mine standard. So in AAGS, we based everything off of the gold mine standard and then expanded on that. That's what we've done with our rubric as well. We've laid it all out. You can go to our website and read it, and we stick to that rubric, and it really just nails down how many creases are there, how many of this. So if we grade something and send it back to you and you count 10 creases and we graded it on the rubric that only has 5 creases, then you can send it back and we can regrade it. So that is the standard. So the last I checked, there are no universities for becoming a master grader for vinyl, but we do have a long time experience. I don't want to speak for Butch, but as he mentioned earlier in the show, that he's been collecting cards and things like that that's been graded for a very long time as well. So we've been living and breathing graded media for many years, and are very familiar with that process, and have established our own process with the rubric that anybody on the internet can reference.
And just to add to that, Drew, it's important to know that the grading that you're getting is for internal consistency.
Yeah.
So the most important thing is to know that a VMG 8 is better than a VMG 7, which is better than a VMG 9, which is better than a VMG 10. I'm sorry, 10 is better than 9, better than 8, better than 7. And it's also important to know that 10 is perfect. It's flawless. So someone may have a great condition, First State Butcher album, but it's really great condition for the year it was produced. It's not great condition for that Taylor Swift album you just grabbed off the rack, which is perfect. And so that Taylor Swift album right off the rack might get a 10, and the best conditioned First State Butcher album might only get an 8, because it's just not perfect. A lot of times, even just they're actually mailed out to the stores imperfect. But what you're getting with the grading process is the assurance that a VMG 10 is better than a VMG 8 in condition. You cannot be assured that a VMG 8 is better than what you would consider an 8 or what another company would consider an 8. And that is just the reality of grading. Grading companies, third-party grading companies, they are internally consistent. And so there's, say, amongst baseball cards, there's certain reputations amongst certain companies that certain companies are easier graders. Well, the issue with that, though, is that the easier graders, their cards often on the secondary market don't make as much money because the people buying that card, once it's been graded, knows that that company is an easy grader. So their 10 doesn't mean as much as, say, PSA's 10. Our goal is to be as internally consistent as possible. So as more VMG albums are out there, someone can say, well, there's 2 for sale. One's a 9, one's an 8. I can feel comfortable knowing that the 9 is better than an 8. I can't feel comfortable knowing that this 9 is absolutely better than this one. This guy is selling ungraded on Discogs, and he says it's perfectly mint. We didn't investigate that album, so we can't tell you if our 9 is better than his mint album, but we can tell you, comparing within the VMG universe, that it's better than, a whole set of other similar albums that got lower grades.
How many clients do you have in your time in your business? So are you still, do you consider yourself a small company? How do you consider yourself from the amount of people you've already slept records?
Yes. So for the purposes of not disclosing too much to our competitors, because we actually have, interestingly, when we started, inexplicably, like 6 companies started all at the same time, which was like the weirdest thing in the world. We were all like, hey, and I know Drew was thinking the same thing. He was thinking, I'm the first person to do this. And then we were like, I think we're the first person to do this. And we're like, who's this Andrew Hoffman character? And then like 7 different companies. Now, most of those companies have gone by the wayside. In the meantime, they've either been the result of companies folding or companies being kind of merging, similar to what we did. But I would say at this point, we're still a small company. It is our, I don't want to say specifics with regards to how many thousands of customers, but I do believe, and kind of the way grading companies tend to go is that they tend to go this way and then they tend to go this way. So ours is certainly on our client base is certainly increasing steadily, and which is good because which is exactly what happened with the grading companies during the pandemic. If you have 1 million customers immediately, then all of a sudden it's taking 2 years to send everything back. But we are absolutely happy with the growth of the company. It's kind of going exactly how we hoped it would go. And we're trying to do that with not only efficiency, but just integrity, not trying to do anything that would momentarily boost our company's bottom line, but cost us long term, because it is not a move that is good for collectors, is good for the vinyl community, which is suspicious or controversial. Our goal from the beginning was, if we can do this, we're going to do it without taking any chances of some of the controversial stuff that has happened to other companies. And I know before we got on, we kind of touched on that a little bit. And our goal has always been never sell our own albums, never grade our own albums unless we have written on the label that they're ours. So everyone knows that we graded them and we're just displaying them ourselves. We're not selling them.
Yeah, I think that's very important.
Never have a financial interest in the sale of one of our albums. Never have a financial interest in, and never allow investors who have a financial interest in the sale of their albums. And so that's all stuff that we've been kind of committed to right from the beginning.
That's great. So Civic has an interesting question. I also had that in my mind. So Civic, thanks for bringing that up. Why should records in potential damaging packaging be higher graded than properly repackaged ones using archival grade materials, like the ones I'm using?
Yes, so that is actually a great question. And the answer actually is that they probably wouldn't be graded better. They might not be graded better. So the grading, remember, is condition. Whereas what we call specking, or the description of what the album is separate than the grade. A collector or an investor may believe that a original butcher cover in the original shrink, which is torn, it's yellowed, it's that old shrink get brittle. The value they place in that is not necessarily the condition; it is the provenance of that. The fact that it is the original. It was originally sold in the store in 40 years ago, 60 years ago. So, however, a brand new album or an album in beautiful packaging may get a better physical grade, but it might not be described as being the original item. It is important because collectors put so much emphasis on provenance, and also because any collectible market has the risk of having people involved who have nefarious motivations. If we do see albums that appear, and this happens actually somewhat frequently, well, not frequently, but enough, that someone has manipulated an album to try to trick buyers into thinking it's in better condition than it is, say, taken a black Rolling Stones cover and colored it in with marker so that people couldn't see the creases. Those will not be graded by us, but condition and authenticity are kind of two different things. And someone might be all in on condition, and they might want the perfect condition one. And someone might say, I don't want the perfect condition one. I want the one that was in the original shrink because I think that's cool. The value there is up to the market. We don't set values. We just describe.
I see. So Jan Erik is saying collecting stamps was a big market until it broke down when the collectors started to die.
Music lives forever. That's all I say. Yeah, my father-in-law, he collects erector sets, the vintage ones, like from the 1920s, the 1930s, and he paid big money. There was clubs, there were magazines. He was invited to be the editor of one of the magazines for the erector set clubs, and they're all dying off, and now it's hard to even give erector sets away. And so that is the case with like stamp collectors. I mean, there's still people that do it, but it's kind of like the fringe. The reason why we wanted to start this company is because, unlike many of the other medias that are collectible, is that music is forever. It stands the test of time. The different types or genres of music might not live forever. So the demand for, for example, swing music has gone way, way down. That usually goes in the bargain bins at the record stores. But the Beatles, Rolling Stones, Bob Dylan, I just saw a YouTube video of kids in a classroom singing a classic rock song. And it shows like Stranger Things keeping this classic, like 1980s music alive. Music can stand the test of time, and it's up to us to preserve that. And so, while I'm not saying that this is a sure bet, invest all of your money into music because it's going to be a great market to invest in. That's not the case per se, but as long as people like music, record collecting is going to keep going, and as long as we find new ways and innovate to the collecting hobby, then it's going to continue to keep growing rather than recede.
Yeah, and I think. Oh, I'm sorry, Nate. Just to add back, if you look back 20 years from today, you look backwards 20 years. If someone had said, "Hey, listen, in 2024, vinyl record collecting is going to be a big thing again, and people are going to be lining up at Walmart and Target to buy vinyl records, and vinyl records are going to outsell every other medium," I think people back then would have said, "You are crazy. There's no way that's going to happen." And yet it did. It did happen, which is amazing when you think of the death knell that was rung for physical music back in the early 2000s with Napster and then with iTunes. And ultimately, there's really no emotion. There's sports has that emotional connection, or has an emotional connection, but music is such an emotional connection with people that it's just so satisfying to not only love this music and love this band, but to have part of that band in your collection. I honestly, and that's what was missing in the digital world, in the digital collecting or the digital music revolution that happened in the early 2000s, where all of a sudden everyone had all this thought, "Oh, this is great. I have this phone in my pocket." But they didn't have the albums. They didn't have, whether it was CDs, vinyl, or cassettes that we all had in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. And people miss that. And I think there's always going to be a place for people who want to own their music, to physically own their music and physically play their music. And that's to say nothing about just the romance of putting a record on and the experience of putting a record on a turntable, which I don't know that will ever die. My son is 14. He did not grow up with vinyl records, and every Christmas, all he gets is vinyl records, and he plays them. He plays them, and he has an iPhone. He could play them, but when he's in his room, he plays the records, and he's 14.
Yeah, I'm totally with you guys, because for me it's also very emotional, because if I can imagine, so my record is now trapped in the slab. Please put it out there. Free my record. I want to listen to it. And we've got some other people who are saying who it's very. I'm not a collector yet, but I already get emotional on this topic. It just feels wrong. Audiophile Journeys continues to take. To sum it up, here are people creating a new business model to earn money. This is not done out of love for the community.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if certainly, I totally understand that feeling, and I don't know that I 100% agree with it, but I certainly respect someone's opinion to have that. This is, I think what it comes down to is that there are people who see record collecting differently than others, and I just do think that there are some folks for whom record collecting is right or wrong, not always about the listening to the music as much as it is about the having the music, or even investing in the music.
It's an investment. Let's be honest. Right. It's a totally investment kind of topic. That's so, like I said, that's the difference. Audiophile journey between, and I've seen many comments as you guys as well. We are, the community with sharing your music, so that we are totally not the target group of this thing. I think for certain records, I totally agree with you, but it's for totally different target group. It's for the investors who say, I pay now $2,000 and I speculate that in 3 years my A-point VMG grading will be 5,000, so I get back my investment. So that's the thing. That's the business model, and these guys are totally honest about it. They're just offering the service. So
and I think regarding what he said, I think he's right regarding collectors, and it's almost is like investors, collectors, and then there's also the collectibles people, which I think
Exactly.
are not so much the collectors. They're more the they're kind of more in the investor world.
Yeah.
You know, it's the idea, this collectible world, which, you know, the people who are, I think, probably buying most of the graded video games are collectibles people, and more than they're people who love Super Mario, but they love Super Mario as like an entity, you know, and they may love Super Mario as an entity. They want to own the best Super Mario, but they might not be the same guy who loves Super Mario because he loves playing it 24 hours a day.
Yeah, and if you consider that a graded sealed Super Mario sold for 1.5 million with heritage, which also had some backstories. But
yes,
these are the kind of people who say, I love the Mario brand. I want to have like my Mario pizza car, my this, my that. So that's for them. We have another question from Jan Eric, and I think it's about the molding of the record, which Drew talked about. If Mr. Fremmer does not want to give his opinion, and might be because of the opponent lawyers taking him to court if he would speak out loud. Oh, that's speculation. We can't address that, I think.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, it was honestly, I wasn't trying to impute that he didn't like it or he did like it, but I have watched other videos where people didn't like it. I've watched some videos where people say, hey, they sound really good. You know, so we'll have to see where it goes from there.
So, and sealed games, that's an interesting name. Music is much more popular than video games. For me, it was clear that there will be a market for it. So he says, sure, of course, there's a market for it for slabbing records. So I'm trying to find the question, but apologies if this has been asked already, but how is grading standardized? Seems like there's little agreement on what VG Plus record is. Oh, I'm sure with that, Justin Peters.
Yeah, so this just kind of gets into the standardization is within VMG. We, you know, certainly took the Goldmine record grading, which is a little vague, and tried and did actually try, you know, make it into a rubric that is specific, is as specific as possible. But the standardization is within VMG. So our VG Plus might not be your exact VG Plus, but our VG Plus is going to be consistent every time we call something a VG Plus or give it the number.
And it might
and
not
should
be
not. Yeah.
Yeah,
oh,
it
go
might
ahead.
not
Sorry.
be consistent with our you know, our competitors' VG Plus.
Right.
We hear all the time, you know, we grade high, we're harder on our grades, or we're higher than the other grading companies' grades. We don't share. Nobody owns the same rubric. So, you know, an 8.0 from them might be a completely different 8.0 for us, and that's not specific to vinyl record grading.
PSA and Beckett, it's the same thing.
Exactly.
Right.
I was gonna use them
PSA,
as the example.
A PSA 10 is a Beckett 9.5.
Correct.
Yeah, exactly. It's so difficult to get a 10 Beckett. So
yes.
That's I totally get that.
So the key is to go onto the website. If you want to submit something, go onto the website and read the rubric carefully and look at the piece that you want to have submitted, and kind of define for yourself based off of that rubric if you want to send that one in, or if you want to go and look for a higher quality one, and then that way you can kind of know generally where it's going to land on our rubric.
So, and Sidwick is asking, is the VMG service available in Europe, or do you intend to bring it to Europe?
Yeah, we are international, so we accept submissions from everywhere. As I said before, we accept multiple. We have multiple clients in Germany, and I believe in UK, and also Europe. So absolutely, we can just work out the shipping. So usually we ask our international clients to place their order, and then pay the actual shipping to us. And then if there's a difference in shipping back to you, we would just invoice that separately, whatever the difference would be. So it's no big deal. You would just go through the same process as we normally do, with that added step of possibly having to pay for a little bit extra for the actual shipping to get it back to you.
And if the goal someday is to, you know, have a warehouse in Europe, boy, we would love to be to the point where we can expand into Europe and have a physical warehouse there to make shipping. But unfortunately, as is the nature of a young company, we're not quite there yet. But when you do, as Drew kind of said, when you do make the submission, there will not the return shipping to you is automated. However, if you are from Europe, it will not be automated, as he said. So there is no automated return. Basically, I advise that you contact us, and we would let you know what return shipping would be, because our website does not have the ability to automate the shipping cost to everyone in the world, only in the United States.
Yeah. So Sidwick also says, as soon as the Asian investors entered the niche here in large scale, the party is over anyway. I've seen it in other areas and it hasn't ended well. Well, when they come investors, and they come with a lot of cash, and that's what's happening. What's your opinion about this, guys?
Well, it's happening now. We are regulars at the Austin Record Convention, which is the largest record show in the United States. We're going to be there next month, have a booth there. You can bring your items to submit. Shameless plug. But when you have to pay a premium to go on the first day, that's the early bird day. And the last time I was there, I didn't see it as much, but all years before that, you would see a handful of Asians coming in from Japan, and buying up armloads, bag loads of records, and then taking them back overseas with them. It's happening now, and
there's nothing wrong with that by any means.
There's nothing wrong,
and there's plenty. And not, I mean, he mentioned Asian investors and specifically, but I mean that's true of all investors. I wouldn't, say it's Asian specific. It's everybody. And there are Asian investors there. There's European investors there. There's African investors there. South American investors there.
And they're also bringing stuff with them as well. So it's kind of
people from all over the world.
Take,
people from all over the world, and we invite all of them to be a part of the collecting community for sure. And happy to have anybody from one side of the world to the other. And I mean, that's the beauty of collecting and having collecting something as wonderful as music, is that everybody, no matter race, creed, nation of origin, they're welcome. And I don't know that any particular group acts any differently than any others. I think they're all welcome, and I think it's great.
So Daniel says, I do find this service to be useful, and sorry if this has been asked, just checking in. Is the sealed from aging issue when exposed to elements? Daniel, what do you mean with?
I think I understand what he means.
Perfect.
So the slab itself is not, and it's important, is not airtight. So it can't be airtight because, God forbid, you don't want mold or something growing in there. However, it is just the nature of ultrasonic sealing is that it's not airtight. The way ultrasonic sealing happens is it allows little tiny holes. Essentially, imagine a bunch of sand to be smushed together. Air can get through there. However, dust would not get through there. And in fact, your item is actually sealed inside a polypropylene bag anyway. However, we would not recommend, say, throwing it into a bathtub full of water. It probably, just like you wouldn't throw any other collectible into a bathtub full of water. So it cannot be airtight. You don't want it airtight because if there's even a fleck of mold inside and it's airtight, it's gonna overgrow. At the same time, you can drop it. It's not, I mean, I don't recommend smashing it, but if you drop it, your album is going to be maintained. I mean, if you drop it from a high enough place, you might end up damaging the case. But just like anything else, you want to handle it with. You can't throw it off a mountain. You can't leave it in, you can't put it in your oven. And you can't throw it in the bottom of the ocean. I wouldn't recommend doing that with anything, whether it's a PSA graded card or a CGC comic book.
So Torsten is saying, investors, I'm out. So Torsten, I can tell you from my personal experiences where we're having in the Netherlands the largest record fair, I think, in Europe, with thousands and thousands of people coming over, and they really have the high grails. And the thing is, people from Asia, from Russia, they're coming in and having these kind of packs with money. So, and they pay certain prices for things, and they buy these things, and then they don't even have a turntable. They store it somewhere and sell it later on. And unfortunately, for those who say, but I would have bought this record and listened to it and enjoyed it, so now it's off the market even for a price which I could never afford, is a certain kind of reality we have to face. That these kinds of people, when there is money to make, they see that and they take the opportunity. So that's my experience with the investors. They're already there for a certain time now.
I agree.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've paid premiums for raw records, and a lot more than I thought I would ever spend on a vinyl record, and it's because I just really wanted that particular record. So, and yes, I wasn't buying it because I didn't care if it was worth nothing tomorrow. I was kind of hoping it would go up in price, or so that way I can, if one day I needed to, sell it, if I needed to raise some cash. So, it's just a more controlled environment being in a slab, and we don't, as we covered already in the video, we're not recommending every single record to be slabbed. There are particular ones that fit the bill, and those are not as many as like the ones behind me. These I'm listening to, I'm not going to slab them.
And that depends on everybody, because I have I have a Hulk Hogan. I don't know if folks, if you know who Hulk Hogan is.
You have this figure? You have his action figure?
No, I don't have. I do actually have his action figure, but I also have I have a record. He was just nearby promoting something, and I have a record with him on the cover, and it's not valuable. It's not even particularly in good shape, but I want to slab it. I don't know what made me think, I grew up a huge fan of Hulk Hogan, and I'm going to slab that myself with a label on it that says it's mine, so it can't be resold, simply because I kind of want to display it, and I think it's kind of cool. So, everybody in their own collection will have things that they may see as investments, or they might just see as keepsakes that they want graded, and but there will always be ungraded records for sure, and there will always be, and the price you pay, even in the absence of a third-party grading company, will always be impacted by investors. And the scarcity of an item, the reason a scarce item is expensive is not because that item is necessarily playing great quality music or has a pretty cover. A lot of times it's because you're bidding against investors who see scarcity and see something that they can invest in. And unfortunately, as you said, Nadine, that's already a reality.
Yes, and high rent district says facing reality and encouraging are two different things. So my impression is not encouraging. So what this stream is about is to have the people up here who do this on a daily basis and explaining their side of the story. It's still up to you if you want to use that service or not. Nobody's forcing you to do anything like this, but it's very important to bring out that these are the possibilities and that they are out there. So Michael says, have you ever thought that taking an existing system, comic, games, Pokemon cards, and forcing it on something different like vinyl might be not such a great idea, as vinyl is a different thing? I think we've already discussed this, but maybe you guys can sum up that question a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I love watching Michael's videos. I just want to mention,
you never mentioned that you like watching my videos.
I do watch your videos. I do, for sure.
I was just kidding.
Yeah, I'm on your show. I'm gonna, of course, watch it. I really like Michael's videos and his perspective on things. And I appreciate that. We're not trying to fit a square peg into a round hole with this. I'm a collector of vinyl records myself. I sought out this service because I really wanted to be able to collect records with the peace of mind that I knew what I was going to be getting. That's the reason why I started soft grading, because I wanted to be able for 15. By the way, it's a $15 service. You get it in the label sealed with a soft wrapper, and then you open it up. You know what it is. That was the whole original concept. But then there is no population report. There is no way of archiving it. So I have items that I don't want to necessarily listen to. So most of the things I listen to are first pressings, and then also audiophile reissues. And I'm not going to slab those. The purpose, the intent on those were to listen to them, unless I have like a rare first pressing that's sealed and it's in such impeccable condition that I want to preserve it, and then I just go buy another one like it that's a player copy, and I can play it and listen to it. So this fit a specific need that I had to preserve items that I did not want to be broken later on down the road. This was not necessarily originally intended to become a billionaire off of a butcher cover or something like that. So it's all in how you collect it. One of my most cherished slabbed records is a Carole King Tapestry album that I had slabbed, because that was the very first record I ever remember listening to on Sunday mornings when my mom would wake up. She'd brew coffee, her and Dad would talk, and she would play Carole King Tapestry on our stereo console. And that's just been emblazoned in me as my entry point into vinyl records. I loved that memory, and so I had that slabbed. It's you go to Goodwill and get a good copy for a couple dollars, but it's precious to me because of that memory. So we're not forcing it on anyone. We are not trying to make things into something that it shouldn't be. It's something that certain people are finding valuable. Some people don't. And that's always going to be the case. In fact, there's still, people in the camp that they despise slabbing comic books. They despise slabbing video games. Some only, they don't even like video games in the box. They only like getting the cartridge, because that way they could pop it into the game console and play it. That is great. Keep doing that. But there are some who found a need here with graded examples, and so we're just trying to fill that need. Nobody else was doing it, and so we wanted to jump in and be able to provide that service at a really reasonable price, with a lot of integrity, by fellow listeners who aren't doing this just for money, but doing it as a part of the community and the hobby, and so we can enjoy it. And just another aspect or element of the record collecting hobby.
Thanks, Drew. We need to wrap it up. We have some time limitations with you guys. We've discussed this earlier on. Mm-hmm. So what I suggest is, I see there are many questions still coming in, is you can write the questions down in the comments below, and I'm sure the team of Butch and Drew will check and answer all your questions. Otherwise, I would recommend that you go on vmgvinyl.com. That's the website where you can find all the informations, and you can ask them, and if you have things. Like I said, write it down in the comment sections below. I know it's a controversial topic, and I still don't think that we are the target group for this. But once again, it's important to hear all sides of each coin, or see all sides of each coin, to get an impression of what it's doing. We have to live with the fact that they're investors, and that's how it is. So thank you, Audiful Journey. It was intense. It was really intense. I'm sweating like hell. And
I had a great time.
Yeah,
It was fantastic.
fun.
I really had a great time. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Bud and Drew, thank you so much for making this possible. I know we had this huge time difference and everything worked out so well. I'm so happy that we had the opportunity to do this. And once again, thanks to everybody in the gallery. And like I said, write the comments down below. VMG will check it out. You guys do nothing. I close the stream now. And thanks once again. And maybe we'll catch each other on the next live stream. Stay safe and stay healthy.
All right.
Sounds
Thank
great.
you so much.